and welcome back to the NWA 1983 project. I'm your host, Lex G, and with me, as always, is Matt Riley. How you doing tonight, Matt?
Oh, I'm great.
You're great.
I think our last 4 episodes, I've been fighting this cold.
Is it lupus?
Huh?
Is it lupus?
No, that was a great movie in the '80s, but it's not about that.
That was Lucas.
Lucas. Oh,
Lucas.
sorry. No. It's just, I got the snugs, so I'm like coughing up. So
that redheaded chick was hot. She was in The Wizard with Fred Savage. That's a good flick.
I have a bottle here of CVS multi-symptom nighttime. I've already been through one bottle, so
bless your heart.
Polishing this shit off.
Tonight's episode will take place live from the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia. Main event for this card will be Dusty Rhodes, the NWA World Champion, taking on Wahoo McDaniel. In addition, we're going to have Nature Boy Ric Flair take on Larry Zbyszko for the National Heavyweight Championship.
Uh-oh. But they're excited about Flair, apparently, the fans.
Yes.
Already.
Not for nothing, when I put that match together, I'm like, did Flair and Zbyszko ever wrestle? And I really couldn't find any footage of Flair and Zbyszko wrestling each other. I thought that would have been a fantastic program if Flair was the babyface.
Yeah, Larry was always better as a heel.
Yeah, agreed. But yeah, that should be an excellent match. I'm kind of curious to see how that goes down. I don't think Larry's going to do the job. But that's Larry for you. I met Larry Zbyszko twice. He's an awesome guy. He talks your ear off. Like, he's one of those guys that you meet at an autograph signing that will just talk to you for 20 minutes if you let him.
Nice.
So, really nice guy. Awesome dude. I love him. We're going to have a few topics to cover. We're going to talk about TNA being sold today.
Oops.
Yeah. Oops, indeed. In addition, we're going to be talking about Pro Wrestling USA, the first time that a group of promoters tried to get together and go national, and how that worked out for them. In addition, we're going to talk about why Matt hates Chris Benoit.
Yeah, that's right.
We teased it on a prior show. We got to talk about it.
Teaser.
So first, I guess we'll talk about TNA being sold. Now, as of 4 hours ago, the Nashville-based TNA wrestling company has been officially sold to Anthem Sports after months of negotiations and secret overtures from the WWE, apparently. And a lawsuit from rock and roll legend Billy Corgan. Rock and roll legend.
I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, that's... So essentially, Anthem Sports, who had been a minority stockholder in TNA for quite a while, bought Dixie out. She had resigned as the chairman of TNA, and she got a different role in Fight Network. When people buy companies like that, usually your figurehead boss gets some sort of no-show job title. For instance, when Ted Turner bought Jim Crockett Promotions, Jim Crockett was still there as an advisor, but he had nothing to do with it. It was basically for him to set out his non-compete clause. So if they were smart, I guess they gave Dixie a non-compete. Not that she's going around opening up wrestling companies, and she shouldn't.
Yeah, no one touched that shit.
Yeah. I think that's real interesting. We're in the age of corporate wrestling now. The big three in the United States: WWE corporation, Ring of Honor owned by a corporation, and now TNA owned by another corporation. I'm kind of curious to see how they reshape the company and their image. And I guess the biggest question going into this is who are they going to bring in to run this thing? Now, if they were smart, they probably would contact Jim Ross and give him whatever type of money he wanted to come in, because if you bring Jim Ross in, it gives them instant credibility.
Right.
In terms of the wrestling fans. But if you're bringing someone, some lower vice president that has no affiliation with professional wrestling and just another suit, this can go poorly real bad. I don't have to remind everyone about the Jim Hurt situation in WCW, or the Brad Siegel situation in WCW, or whatever goofy suits they brought in between their wrestling guys. So that's all we have in terms of the story now, but this is a breaking news story, and we'll continue to cover it throughout the upcoming weeks as we get more information. I'm curious about, are they going to still be broadcast on Pop TV? Are they going to be able to get on a viable network? Are they going to have a streaming platform? Are they going to continue to do pay-per-views? Are they going to do live events and house shows and that kind of stuff? Or, is this something that Fight Network's in half for a little bit and then quietly close the doors. Because I believe TNA owed them money. They just got their money back and they, kill it, which is a distinct possibility. So what are your thoughts on TNA being sold?
I think, I think it's a good thing. Because herring in limbo is always bad, not having any kind of solution. But I do feel that there is always a specter of closing. So I think if they don't do anything major in the next, let's say, month or so, if they don't make some kind of major bold move, whether it's signing someone, announcing an event, something to really jar things, then I think it's going to be a matter of people going, well, whatever, this Ring of Honor, and to not have some sort of major competitor. I mean, we already talked about before, like, who could compete with WWE? Because I think someone could, and they don't even realize, like, you don't have to be a toe-to-toe company, so to speak.
No.
Just put on a product that's good.
All you have to do is make money.
Right.
That's all you have to do.
I was thinking, like, ECW wasn't like this juggernaut, but they had a hardcore fan audience. They innovated. They changed some of the ways wrestling was.
Some for the better, some for the worse.
Right, but it still made an impact. So I feel like, for the right combination, they could totally do a lot with TNA.
I mean, first thing you do is change that fucking name right off the fucking bat.
Yeah, I would. We talked about it before, but I would change that as well.
Yeah, because that's pretty ridiculous. I think they need to get some new creative people in there. I mean, I love Al Snow, some of the other creative people, not so much. But, if you get the right mix of people in there, you can definitely do some damage. There's talent out there. Just because they're not signed with the WWE doesn't mean there's not talent. Wrestle Kingdom was last night. And we know that for a fact that there's talent out there. So I wouldn't be concerned about not having talent.
Well, I wouldn't say talent in the Rumble they ran, but
I try to explain that to you. It's the comedy match. It's your Divas battle.
It just when you see a guy called Hamburger standing next to Scott Norton, you're like, really? Burger, whatever he calls himself.
Cheeseburger
guy.
He's your millennial 1-2-3 kid. Although Scott Norton looked jacked though.
What's that?
Scott Norton looked jacked.
Well, he's a big guy, but he was
an over the top.
Yeah.
That's my favorite movie from the 80s, by the way.
Is it really?
Yep.
More than Rocky 3?
Rocky 4. It's close.
Rocky 4. I will say, I think Rocky 3, for the record, has one of the top 5 opening sequences ever.
Yeah.
Talk about recap, draw you in, set the stage. Oh, yeah.
Well, Sylvester Stallone is the best wrestling writer that's not in wrestling. Because the Rocky movies are wrestling angles from 1 through 7. Or Creed, if you want to be a jerk about it.
Creed.
Look at the first Rocky movie. That's the equivalent of your 60-minute draw in wrestling. Then they got to bring it back. And then you had the underdog Rocky win. And look how he won the fight. He got up 1 second before. You know what I mean? Obviously, go to Rocky 3. Rocky gets beat by the monster heel, right? His manager gets killed.
Hey, woman! Hey, woman!
Manager dies.
Yeah, that was good.
And then his former adversary trains him for his comeback.
That was good.
And then Rocky 4, the monster here kills Apollo Creed. And Rocky goes on a big training montage in Russia. And comes back and beats the giant Russian heel. And then in Rocky 5 is the clear-cut student versus teacher type of deal, which they've done in wrestling a million times. It's your Larry Zbyszko and Bruno Sammartino all over again. Terry Funk choreographed the fight in that movie, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. And then obviously your Rocky Balboa is your Ric Flair type comeback when he had that one last comeback. And then in Creed, you're training the up and comer, right? Your Jose Lothario, Shawn Michaels scenario, or if you want to be more of an obscurist, your Jackie Fargo and the Fabulous Ones angle. Same difference. So Sylvester Stallone is the best non-wrestling writer, I guess. Best wrestler writer not in wrestling. He did a movie about wrestling. Paradise Alley. It's a good flick.
I couldn't get past the opening 2 minutes.
You got to get past it. Once you do that, you're okay. Terry Funk's in that movie, too.
Of course he is.
And Ted DiBiase. So that being said, TNA sold today, so hopefully they change their name to get some good wrestlers in there, some good creative people, change the look of the show, maybe get on a viable network or a streaming media platform. It'd be nice to see them on Hulu or maybe a Netflix type deal, and kind of change the landscape here of professional wrestling in the United States. So Matt, I know we teased this on the earlier episode. I know why I dislike Chris Benoit, but why do you dislike Chris Benoit?
It's gonna sound funny.
Is it because he murdered a bunch of people?
No, that goes without saying. That's like kind of like, you know.
That's not what we're talking about, by the way, folks. I just want to make sure everyone understands that.
No, yeah.
Chris Benoit is a terrible human being for the shit that he did to his family.
Yeah.
But you don't like him as a wrestler.
No, I did not. And you know what it is? I found his movements stunted and awkward.
Were they stiff? You think they were stiff?
Very stiff. He even his clotheslines came off looking like, and it sounds awkward, but like that his arms were too small for his body.
Mm.
Like his steps were always, he'd go on spins every so often where he had kind of a good, set of moves. But for the most part, I always found his moves style very stunted, awkward, and unappealing.
No, I would say this. He is not as fluid as the Dynamite Kid, who he's often compared to.
Yeah.
Dynamite, and I'm not talking about WWF Dynamite. We're talking about Stampede Wrestling Japan Dynamite Kid. Just a year into his WWF run, he hurt his back really bad, and he was not as good as he was. But that being said, he wasn't as fluid as Dynamite. Now, for me, Benoit, I love Benoit. I was there at WrestleMania 20 when he won the championship. Big Benoit fan. I had followed him since ECW when he was there. Guy did a fucking top rope powerbomb off the table. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think Bell the Bell, I think he could be top 15 all time, in my opinion. If you watch matches with like Bret Hart, obviously the matches with Kurt Angle, they were super fantastic. Matches with Chris Jericho, they were really, really good. His knocks are, he had hard times having matches with bigger guys. So he couldn't really carry like a Sid to a good match, where like a guy like Bret Hart could. He couldn't carry like a Kevin Nash type. So that was like his biggest knock, in my opinion. But I think, Bell the Bell, he was fantastic. Now, what really hurts is his inability to have a worthwhile promo. He always seemed nervous when he talked. He was someone, I don't know if this makes any sense, and this might make sense, broader scope of things. You ever see someone who's an angry person who's trying to not be angry?
Yeah.
Like he's like forcing himself not to be angry. That was Benoit. Like you saw like this intensity and fire, but he was never ever be able to communicate that with the audience. Now he was able to communicate that in the ring, I felt, but I don't think he was able to communicate that to the audience, at least verbally or by facials, because he didn't really have any facials.
Yeah.
Although when he did knock out his tooth, I think that helped him. the toothless aggression era, as they say.
Toothless aggression.
We got the news yesterday that they're dropping the charges on Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
Yeah.
He was deemed incompetent to stand trial. I'm not going to get into the whole, Benoit tragedy, but he would have been long retired by this point, I would assume, although he was in really good shape. But I think, although Jericho's still wrestling, though, but I think Jericho's like a Flair where he's going to wrestle till he's fucking 60. But I think his legacy is tarnished to a point where it's unrepairable. And you're going to have your Benoit defenders, and I understand that, and you can defend him, It goes back to, like, where do you draw the line between the wrestler and the man? Like, can we appreciate O.J. Simpson for the great football player he was, but kind of remove that from the stuff that he was accused of and the stuff that he was actually found guilty of and the fact that he's currently still in prison? Can we remove Pete Rose, probably the greatest hitter of all time? Can we separate that from the betting scandal? Can we separate the guys like Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa from the steroid scandal? It's hard. It's hard to do. And for me, when that went down, I was very close to no longer watching wrestling anymore because he was someone that I was a fan of who did this awful thing. It was at a point where a lot of wrestlers were dying left and right.
Yeah.
I think Sherry had died the week before. Sensational Sherry had died.
Oh, yeah.
The week before. Eddie Guerrero had died, 2 years before that, maybe a year before that?
Oh, yeah, but that was the one time that Benoit looked natural on camera.
Yeah.
When he was
crying.
Gushing snugs at his nose.
Yeah. And it's a shame because I think he is a talented performer. Now, the critiques of him are legitimate, and he might be considered overrated in terms of, he did a lot of cool stuff, but did it resonate with the crowd? I'm not sure. I haven't watched a Benoit match in a while, to be completely honest, full disclosure. I have a hard time watching them. But from what I remember, I mean, he had good matches with a lot of different people. The matches with Jericho and Angle and Brock Lesnar and all these guys, and Triple H even. And it's kind of a shame that we didn't see how this would play out straight through. It goes back to Jimmy Snuka. Is like, and now these rumors had been around for a while. We knew this with Jimmy probably since the late 80s. There was a Playboy article in the mid 80s that kind of detailed all this.
Yeah, a
lot of us still cheered Jimmy, but he was never proven. And it's sad to see the way kind of Jimmy ended up, because for a moment of time, and no matter how brief it was, he was the biggest star in wrestling. Post Bruno, pre Hogan, 83, early 83 into the early part of 84, he was the most popular wrestler in the world. And to go from that to the stuff that had happened, there's rumors that that's the reason he was taken off the card for WrestleMania 1, because it was supposed to be a 6-man match.
Oh, really?
They didn't know how that was going to go.
Oh.
You know what I mean? So, and obviously after, because you find it weird, right? How come it's just a tag team? Because Jimmy's there. Bob Orton's on the outside. It's weird. There's a lot of weird things about WrestleMania 1 and who's not on it. Because you look at the roster, I'm like, why isn't Rocky Johnson or Don Morocco or a litany of Ken Patera? We know why Dr. D, David Stoltz's not on it, but Dynamite Kid, British Bulldogs were there. They had just debuted 2 weeks before. But fucking the Mass Executioner, fucking Matt Bourne's on the show, and S.D. Jones. That's a whole nother. It's weird. I don't know. But what are you gonna do about it? Anyone else you hate that we can talk about on the future show? Want to talk about Paul Jones or Gary Hart or Lord James Blears, Alfred Hayes.
Bum. Who do I really? Well,
I don't like Booker T. I like Booker T the wrestler, but as a person, I think he's a jerk.
The commentator is terrible.
Well, yeah, he shouldn't be anywhere near a microphone.
No,
absolutely not.
Absolutely awful.
He's going to run for mayor in Houston.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I thought felons couldn't run for mayor.
Apparently not. Well,
see, it is Houston.
There it is.
Well, we'll bury some more guys on a future show.
That's right.
Yeah. So next up, we'll talk about Pro Wrestling USA. Now, for those of you who don't know or simply the uninitiated, Pro Wrestling USA was the AWA and the NWA getting together.
Oh, yeah.
And made a pact with each other. They're going to unite to take down Vince McMahon and the WWF, who had gone national earlier that same year. Obviously, the members of the National Wrestling Alliance was very upset at Vince McMahon for buying out Georgia Championship Wrestling. Now he had TBS in a national spotlight. They're also pissed that he had bought, prior to this, the time slot for Southwest Wrestling, which is on the USA Network, which is interesting because it's still, Raw is on the USA Network to this day. So they had a relationship since back then. And the WWF to start running areas that they wouldn't normally run. So they're going into Chicago, and they're going into Ohio, and they're going into Florida, and then going into Los Angeles. And, the promoters at the time were aghast at this. They're like, I don't know, what are you doing? I don't understand. So with that kind of mindset, they're like, oh, let's get together, and we're going to go national. Just like what we're doing with the NWA 1983 project. So the principals of this were Jerry Jarrett, Jerry Lawler, the owners of the CWA Memphis, Vern Gagne, the owner of the American Wrestling Association, Ole Anderson, who was the owner of Georgia Championship Wrestling, not the Georgia Championship Wrestling, Ole Anderson's Georgia Championship Wrestling. There's a difference. We'll talk about that on a future episode. And Jim Crockett Jr., the owner of Jim Crockett Promotions, who was the centerpiece at the NWA at the time. So basically, and I'm not sure what network this was broadcast on. It may have been ESPN. Again, if they're going national, they need to have a national television platform, and obviously weren't going on TBS. So I think this is where ESPN came in and carried Pro Wrestling USA. Now, I spent this morning watching every episode I could find of Pro Wrestling USA.
Oh, no.
So
wait, this morning you watched every episode?
Yeah, because I could only find like 6 or 7.
I was going to say, that doesn't bode well.
It was from like late 84 to the middle of 85 is what I found. The first show took place in Memphis, Tennessee, but Pro Wrestling USA went around to all the territories and featured a combination shows. In addition, and this was, I think, their first mistake. Pro Wrestling USA, kind of in inception, was kind of branded for the New York market. So I can see Verm's like, oh, Vince is going to run Minneapolis, we're going to run right into New York. Mistake. So a lot of the shows were taped at in East Rutherford, New Jersey. That's where the Giants play, and the Jets. And they were going to try to undermine the WWF. Its home turf.
Where the Giants play and the Jets lose.
Shut up. You gotta understand something. At the time in 1984, the WWF was financially hurting. To spread national the way they were, and they're buying time slots all across the country, and the tour, you're sending people from New York to LA to Chicago, cost a lot of money. So I guess what they were thinking is like, we're going to just go punch him in the face, go to New York. He's not in New York because he's running all these other towns. We'll take over New York. He's finished.
Ah, the old 1-2.
Didn't work out that way, unfortunately. So the peak of Pro Wrestling USA was the pay-per-view Super Clash. I was in Chicago, and it drew over 21,000 people in Comiskey Park. And this was September 28th, 1985. The main event of that show was Ric Flair versus Magnum TA for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, and Rick Martel versus Dan Hansen for the AWA World Heavyweight Championship. I've seen that show, and that show was actually really good. Unfortunately for Pro Wrestling USA, Crockett pulled his talent out because Jim Crockett and Vernon Gagne could not get along. And Greg Gagne tells a story that David Crockett was trying to sign talent behind his back. There was no official booker. It was supposed to be Vern, from what I understand, but everyone kind of wanted to do their own thing, and that never works. So if you have Jerry Jarrett wants to feature Jerry Lawler, and Crockett wants to feature Dusty and Flair, and Vern wants to use Bockwinkel and Crusher Blackwell, as their main event guys, Sergeant Slaughter. It wasn't going to work because when you build a wrestling company, you need to have a hierarchy. You have your top guys, your main eventers, your upper mid card, middle mid card, lower mid cards, job guys. You need to have some sort of continuity there. So when I watch these shows, I know a couple of strange things right off the bat. It was weird seeing Lance Russell as the interviewer. I think they had Jack Reynolds and Blackjack Mulligan as your announcers. Oh boy! You have Lance Russell right there, and you don't use him. I don't know why you would do that. That is a little bit off-putting and a little bit jarring. And the matches were fine. I mean, the matches were, typical fare. Like you'll see Ric Flair versus Mike Davis, and you'll see the Road Warriors beat up, two job guys, and you had Terry Funk and Nick Bockwinkel as a tag team. And you had Dusty cutting promos over here, Ric Flair cutting promos over here. But it seemed to me they weren't all at the show. It looked like Flair was cutting promos from the studio in Charlotte. And, Dusty's over in Atlanta cutting promos off of TBS. And they're just kind of packaging these things in. And the first thing they were really kind of focused on was, well, we have the NWA champion and we have the AWA champion. Who's better? And the NWA champion at the time was Ric Flair, and the AWA champion was Rick Martel. And then they brought in Bob Backlund. And they had billed Bob Backlund as the uncrowned WWF champion. And they say WWF champion, like they just threw WWF champion out there like they didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
It was like, well, he never lost to the Iron Sheik. Arnold Skaaland threw in the towel for him. Hogan never beat him. So he's still the unclaimed, the uncrowned WWF champion. And they were going to try to do, kind of a round robin feud thing. And they're going to find out who is the true World Heavyweight Champion.
Oh, boy.
Now, the issues with that is that who's going to do the job there? And the answer is no one, because no one did. So obviously you didn't have Ric Flair beating Rick Martel, which is probably the way I would have booked it, for the real World Championship. You go have these goofy draws, double countouts, these dusty finishes. And that novelty of having both champions in the same company will only work for so long. Then no one gives a shit. And it seemed to me that it was a lot of NWA guys versus NWA guys, and it was a lot of AWA guys versus AWA guys. At least that's what it seemed like. I don't have rosters in front of me to see who was there, but I didn't see Stan Hansen taking on Ole Anderson, or I didn't see Bruiser Brody taking on Dusty Rhodes. Another thing that weirded me out when I was watching this: Dusty Rhodes, Manny Fernandez, World Tag Team Champions. When did this happen? I don't even remember that. Do you remember when Manny Fernandez and Dusty Rhodes? You watched NWA in like '85.
Yeah, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, no one does. I think it might be one of those Mandela effects. I don't think that happened. And the World Tag Team Champions and the AWA World Tag Team Champions are the Road Warriors. We never got our Manny Fernandez and Dusty Rhodes versus the Road Warriors, at least on TV. They may have had that on house shows, but who the fuck cares about that at this point? Fuck, you're trying to launch a national company, you gotta do some shit.
Yeah.
Although the Road Warriors, this is pre-Spikes Road Warriors, and they're still wearing their chaps, which is weird because they look like bikers from the Village People. It looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
Why is Paul Ellering wearing a karate outfit? And it's funny there because what I would have done, and this might be a spoiler for NWA 84, you pick one guy, and it wouldn't have been Martel. It sure as fuck would have been Bockwinkel. It wouldn't have been Dusty. And it might not have been Flair. Like some new, fresh guy come in. He beats Martel. He beats Flair. You had superstar Billy Graham there at the time, former WWF champion, having beat Billy Graham, having beat Bob Backlund. Yeah. And he's the guy. He doesn't work for either company. He's going to be your main guy because you need your top guy, your main guy, who's going to be able to go back and forth. He can fight a Flair. He can fight a Martel. He can fight a Dusty. He can fight a Bockwinkel and Zbyszko and those guys. And they didn't do that. And that's what they should have done. I don't know who this guy would have been. It would not have been Crusher Blackwell. I'll tell you that much. It probably would have not been Mass Superstar either. But we would have found something, maybe Magnum. Let's say Magnum TA.
Yeah.
And make him the champion of champions, right? Tully Blanchard. Somebody.
Yeah.
Because this is why it doesn't work, because, okay, you have Ric Flair, who's a heel at the time, who's the NWA champion. Now, if you put him and Martel in an NWA stronghold, they're cheering Flair, but Martel's the babyface.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't work. You're not gonna go to fucking Charlotte and have people cheer for Rick Martel or Ric Flair. That's not going to happen. And you're not going to Quebec or Minneapolis, they have a vested interest in Rick Martel. They're not going to cheer Flair. So it's fucked. At that moment, you're fucked. So you would have to have a third party. Bring someone in. There's plenty of wrestlers around the world you could have brought in. Bring in someone from Japan. Bring in somebody to take this spot as your champion of champions. And you can still have your NWA champion and your AWA champion. But this guy's the champion of champions. And call that a fucking day. So Jim Crockett leaves Pro Wrestling USA, and who replaces them? World Class Championship Wrestling comes in and tries to do something there. That's when they had the famous Jerry Lawler, Kerry Von Erich match. I believe that was Super Clash 3, where Kerry bled buckets.
Love that match.
Yeah. Apparently, Kerry didn't know he was losing either. They told him right before the match.
Really?
He thought he was going to win. Because they were arguing back and forth, and Vern wanted Jerry, and Fritz wanted Kerry, and then Vern didn't pay everybody, so Lawler kept the belt. And at that point, the AWA was dead. You lost continuity there, and it was really tenuous at the time. So it went from Bockwinkel to Hennig to Lawler, and that was it. So then Memphis was out. So they formed both World Class and Memphis ended up leaving. Obviously, World Class and Memphis formed the USWA. But that didn't work out either, and Fritz left that, and then World Class went out of business. It was done. Although, in reality, the CWA, WCCW, and AWA thing wasn't really called a Pro Wrestling USA, but that's kind of the aftermath there. Their show, the Pro Wrestling USA show, just became an AWA show. And I could tell that because I'm watching it, and all of a sudden, you look at the mat. Now, NWA had the NWA logo. It wasn't really a logo. It was just fucking three letters in yellow saying NWA on the apron, right? AWA had the logo on the mat in the ring. So that's where the NWA and AWA different in terms of their looks. When they had the Pro Wrestling USA show, the ring was just blank. So nothing on the apron, nothing on the mat. As we got further along, you start seeing the AWA logo on the mat, and they can tell, you can tell that the Crockett's are getting either pushed out, phased out, or they're leaving on their own accord. At that, but I saw some really cool stuff there too. Like I saw a tag team of Jerry Blackwell and fucking Sergeant Slaughter, and they're fucking singing the national anthem and shit. Which is funny because Jerry Blackwell, like a year prior to that, was like some sort of Mika Singh, some shit like that, and the AWA fighting like Hogan and shit.
Really?
Yeah. So that was jarring and off-putting slightly, and we had the High Flyers were still there. There was Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell. I guess Jim Brunzell was hurt because they had Hennig substituting for him. So they had Gagne and Hennig as a tag team. But in terms of the AWA, they didn't really have the stars like they did in the past. Losing Hogan hurt them, but it didn't hurt them at first because right when Hogan left, they brought in the Road Warriors. So the Road Warriors pop business. They're from Chicago, but they're really from Minnesota. But they're from Chicago, and it maintained until you lost the Road Warriors. And then you tried to bring in the Freebirds, and you tried to bring in... They started bringing in the guys that WWF didn't want, or guys that were up and coming. So you saw your Midnight Rockers, and you saw Jimmy Snuka was there, and it became a mess. And if you don't have the talent, you don't have in your prime talent for your wrestling company, it wasn't going to work. But that's so Pro Wrestling USA, good idea, poorly executed for the reasons I've stated, and that's why we're not going to do any of that for the NWA 1983 project as we attempt to go national a year before this debacle occurs. And I can see Vince is laughing and giggling, yeah, these guys are dummies.
Yeah. And
he said he knew it was going to fail. These guys couldn't even order a cup of coffee together. How are they going to run a wrestling promotion? So he wasn't worried at all. While you guys are focused on this, I'm going to go run in Chicago now and have WrestleMania 2. And I'm going to do the Wrestling Classic. That was in Chicago, too. That was the first wrestling pay-per-view. Not WrestleMania 1, because WrestleMania 1 was only closed circuit only. So, Matt, what are your thoughts on Pro Wrestling USA? You told me you never heard of it. I find that hard to believe.
I think I did. I just didn't remember the name of it. I didn't remember it being... I remember Super Clash 3 because I remember ordering the pay-per-view and watching it.
When it had 6 people in the audience?
Yeah. It was just... Oh, man. It was a terrible show. But to this day, whenever I cut myself at work or someone cut, I'm like, they're fine, they bleed all the time. The Frank Dusek line, which is my favorite, because Kerry Barnett was just bleeding buckets. I mean, just torrential downpour of blood. He's fine, he bleeds all the time. I think it shows that you need to have one person be the shot caller.
Yeah.
Ultimately. Even if you have people working together, for this show, this is what we're doing. And I think they don't look at the big picture. Let's say, for example, Kerry Von Erich says, okay, fine, I'm going to lose, but I'm going to chase Lawler, and I'm going to win it back at Super Clash 4. Mm-hmm. Or at some point, you build to it. I was working late, so I read the results of SmackDown. And I guess Ambrose beat Miz for the belt, the IC belt.
Yeah.
And in the commentary, the guy was like, I would have had him probably win it later on, not so soon, in the chase, so to speak. But there's, for whatever reason, they have this real problem with, outside of, now and then, keeping a belt on somebody. And I think that can help build prestige. Well, I think the problem they have a lot of time is they don't realize they got to build up in challengers. Well, if you constantly have these draws, like you were saying, like before, if every one of the title versus title matches ends in a draw, people realize it's going to be bull.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those classic things. It's a good idea and concept, but it doesn't work when you have too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah. Like Vince just had Vince and Pat Patterson.
Right.
This is pre-writers. This is pre-everything. Just Vince and Pat by the pool, and then they would bring in guys like Bruce Pritchard and Jim Cornette and J.J. Dillon, and they add people here and there, but for the most part, it was always Pat and Vince anyway. To me, these guys, it was too little too late. You needed to go national in 82 or 83, 84, in everyone's mind, WWF is where it's at. They have all the best wrestlers. They go in the territories and have more Mid-South talent. They come in there with Junkyard Dog and fucking Paul Orndorff and all these guys that were big stars in these areas. Even Hogan. They got Hogan, like literally, like the first thing they do is to go to Minneapolis, where Hogan was just the number one star.
Yeah, and
that's amazing foresight on Vince's part to do this. It's a dick move, but foresight nonetheless.
Yeah.
It's funny because on the first Houston show, when they acquired Houston, or at least pseudo-acquired Houston, that's up for debate. They throw out that first show. Then Ted DiBiase makes his debut in Houston as a babyface, and this is like a month before he becomes $1 Million Man.
Yeah.
Just to pop the crowd and just to get like, oh, there's Jim Duggan and there's Ted DiBiase. We know these guys. So like you may not recognize the name WWF, but that's just that wrestling that has my favorite wrestler Ted DiBiase on it, or Jim Duggan or whoever, right. Butch Reed. And they're gonna go watch that instead of watching has-beens, up-and-comers, and guys who never had it, wrestle. You know what I mean? So it's like, what are you gonna do? Bless their hearts. So I mentioned earlier, we're just coming off the heels of Wrestle Kingdom. Rave reviews as of right now today. Have not watched it yet. It is 5 hours long, but I do plan on watching it, and we'll get back to everyone on our thoughts on Wrestle Kingdom. It seems to me, Matt, that you really care for the opener that much.
What I've watched so far, no. Yeah, it's not the best.
It gets better, trust me. It builds sure like a card should.
But again, yeah, that's right. Your card should get better as you go along. But I watch it, and I'm like, all right, oh, and then like when the guy comes out, and I can't think of his name, like Kobayashi or something like that, and he can barely walk, and it's like this guy's old. Like he looks like Mr. Takagi from Die Hard. I don't know.
Blasphemy.
I know.
So what Matt was referring to was the New Japan Rumble that had Michael Elgin, Billy Gunn, Bone Soldier, Cheeseburger, Hiro Sato, Tenzan, Liger, Kobayashi, Natashi, Taguchi, Scott Norton, Tiger Mask, and Yoti Tatsu and Yuji Nagata. In addition to that, and that was on the pre-show, by the way, Matt.
Okay.
Yeah. It starts out with the new Tiger Mask W, taking on Tiger Mask the Dark. And that's based on the new anime series I have on there. That's really, really good. You had Roppongi Vice taking on the Young Bucks. You had the gauntlet match for the Never Openweight 6-Man Tag Team Championship. We had Bushi, Evil, and Sonata taking on David Finlay, Ricochet, and Kojima. In addition, you had in that match Bullet Club, Bad Luck Fale, Hangman Page, and Tanahashi. Then you had Jado, Will Ospreay, and Yoshihashi. So that should be a really cool match, I think. Yeah, the debut of Cody Rhodes taking on Juice Robinson. Adam Cole taking on
Juice Robinson.
Yeah, Juice
Robinson. Juice Robinson.
He was C.J. Parker and NXT.
Juice Newton.
That's it. That is right. Adam Cole taking on Kyle O'Reilly for the Ring of Honor World Championship. Chaos, who defeated Guerrillas of Destiny and GBH. And that was a 3-way tag team match for the IWGP Tag Championship. Tanahashi versus Kushida for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. Goto taking on Shibata for the Never Open Weight Championship. Nato taking on Tanahashi for the IWGP Intercontinental Championship, which is weird that they have an Intercontinental Championship because I'm pretty sure Japan's on one continent. I could be wrong, though. And then you had the main event, which is Okada taking on Kenny Omega for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. So just about all these matches are a championship match, other than the Cody Rhodes versus Juice Robinson match and the Tiger Mask versus Tiger the Dark match. So all championship matches. But rave reviews as of today being January 5th, 2007. So, and the Wrestle Kingdom, or the January 4th show, the Tokyo Dome, has a long and storied history, and we'll talk about that in a future episode. It is the largest wrestling show outside of the United States. It's the WrestleMania of Japan. They would bring in people from other promotions. There have been times where you've seen, NWA, WCW guys, Ring of Honor, TNA, all on one show, and it's a happening to bite off Gorilla Monsoon. It is happening over in Japan. It's really huge, and it's American commentary, which they started, I think, like 3 or 4 years ago. They started with the English commentary on it. So good to see you be able to follow along with the matches. So that's awesome. How would you call Japanese wrestling? Would you call Japanese wrestling different than American wrestling?
How do you mean, like the actual action in the ring?
Yeah. Because you watch the WWE, and they're always talking about, follow us on Twitter. Oh, here's their lettuce Pepsi product. Blah 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 blah. And they will call 3/4 of the match. You feel in Japan, they probably would have to call move for move.
Oof.
Because the style is different. It is, they work different in Japan. So it's obviously because it's different. But I think Jim Ross did a good job when he called it that one year. I think last 2 years, whenever he called it. He's called that show before, but it was the WCW New Japan Super Show at the time, or Starrcade 91 Japan version. It's a really good show, by the way. Not on the network, but I think you can find it if you look for it hard enough. I have a copy of it. So that's all that really matters, right? Are you excited about the Royal Rumble?
I am. I think it'll be fun. Again, it's...
You think they're going to do Goldberg versus Roman Reigns, or they're going to do Roman Reigns versus John Cena, or maybe a combination of both?
Oh, for the...
Like, what do you think they're going to do at WrestleMania, based on what happens on the Royal Rumble? You think? Because they looked like they're teasing Roman Reigns and John Cena.
Yeah.
We also have Goldberg in the mix too.
My problem is that their lack of recognizing how just that Reigns isn't over the way he should be, to me, is inviting another Batista.
Yeah.
It's like you're better off going AJ Styles versus, Cena, let's say.
Well, they're doing that match at the Rumble.
Right. So, okay, well, we'll say then I'd say Styles versus Reigns, but have Styles retain. Like, I think it's one of those things where you can almost have him earn more respect by losing clean than going over.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the argument against that, we already seen Styles and Reigns a couple times. There's not a whole lot of fresh matchups currently because they've blown their wad on a lot of this stuff already. So This is what, the third or fourth AJ Styles versus John Cena match. This is like the third or fourth Kevin Owens Roman Reigns match. But Chris Jericho will be suspended over the ring in a shark cage.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a throwback. That's a throwback gimmick because he used to do that shit to Cornette all the time.
Yeah.
And then they're gonna have announced already Charlotte versus Bayley for the Raw Women's Championship. Again, not a lot of ways you can go. This is when you need to bring someone in from another brand.
Yeah.
So we've seen AJ Styles versus John Cena a bunch of times. You need to bring someone over from Raw.
Do you do the curveball and bring in Kurt Angle or someone like that, like someone unexpected.
I mean,
Samoa Joe.
Samoa Joe would be my pick. And then you would have, I would do Samoa Joe coming in at the Rumble, possibly winning it.
Right.
I know I'm sounding like a really big smart mark, but whatever. But then you look past it. Samoa Joe comes in, wins the Rumble, and now you have Stephanie and Shane trying to get him on their brand. Because this guy came out of nowhere. He's an NXT. He's a big-time free agent. And it's a big deal that he wins it. Now they're going to try to get him on the show.
Yeah.
And he has that championship match. You know what I mean? So he can either face Kevin Owens or AJ Styles. I think Samoa Joe, AJ Styles would be the match. You know, we haven't seen it in a while, and the matches they've had together have been fantastic. If you want to go back to, even shows on the Indies and TNA, their matches have always been top notch. And you can always go with the Chris Jericho, Kevin Owens matchup anyway at WrestleMania. So that's the way I would go. I think Samoa Joe would be probably better use for him on SmackDown than it is on Raw right now. But you still have Goldberg out there too. So Goldberg and Brock Lesnar, they throw an element of, well, is Goldberg going to win it? Is Brock Lesnar going to win it? Or are they going to bring someone in from somewhere else to win it? So the Rumble, like all good Royal Rumbles should, it does have an element of suspense and surprise because you're not sure if, is Goldberg going to win it?
Yeah.
Or are you going to do the goofy? This is probably the more realistic. You probably end up doing a scenario where Goldberg and Lesnar eliminate each other. Then you move on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, okay. And we haven't seen Goldberg on SmackDown yet, have we?
No.
Oh. Because they have him listed as a free agent. I don't know what that means if he's only appearing on Raw.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense to me. Do you try to elevate a Braun Strowman, perhaps? Him and his Tinder page. What are your thoughts on Braun Strowman and the Tinder?
I love that his name's Adam. That's great. He's just sitting in the pool, and the headline of the story was looking for a different type of match. And it's like, yeah, I don't know, the guy needs Tinder. All I suppose, like you were saying earlier, if they had Tinder back when the Rock and Roll Express were around or whatever, hey, he's in town for a night. Live it up, dude.
I'm just saying. And Ricky Morton's probably saying this shit right now when he heard that story. Like, I didn't need any Tinder. I used to have 25 girls behind the Mid-South Coliseum begging to give me a hand job. And maybe Braun Strowman does not have that. I don't know.
Yes, I would say that's correct.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, too. I think wrestlers are so separate from... I haven't done it yet, but every time there's a wrestling show in Boston, I live in Saugus, which is just north of Boston. And Kowloon is this old-time, been around forever restaurant. My parents had one of their first dates there. Okay. That's how long it's been around. And it's on this hill, coming out of Route 1 in Boston, into North Shore. And it's gigantic. And they have a second floor. It's enormous. They have comedy shows and special events. They close the whole thing off every time the wrestlers are in town, and they go there. There's pictures of all the wrestlers there, like Chris Jericho, Rock, etc. So I'm Braun Strowman, and I have a chance to go to Saugus and pick up a chick. Let me tell you right now, Braun, don't do it. Use Tinder, and you take the pick of the litter, right? Yeah. You don't just throw it to chance. I say more power to Braun Strowman.
You think because on the outside looking in, I'm like, can this guy not get girls? I don't understand Tinder and all that stuff. Again, I've been in a committed relationship for quite a while, for a long time. So I didn't get into some of this stuff, So I don't understand it, the social media or the dating site kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the outside looking in, it's like, can this guy not get girls? Or is it a case of he's super picky and he wants to see some pictures of these chicks and make sure they ain't crazy? But can you really tell that on a Tinder page?
Well, maybe it's a buffer. Think about how many NBA players get the baby mama drama. You know, they don't want to
Yeah.
deal with that shit. And maybe they're like, you know, this will let me at least weed people out, see if they're a legit person or not.
You can screen them better.
Right. You know, so maybe you're gonna be able to, you know, filter through a little bit better.
Didn't you have something on there that said like I love steaks and lifting weights?
I didn't read the whole thing. That's hey man, good for him. You know, like can be interesting. There's like the thing about Tinder is you'll see people you know, and what Tinder does is if you're not familiar with Tinder, it's a dating. And when you go look on it, it's very simple. Either you swipe left and say nah, or you swipe right and say yeah, or there's super like, which is like, hey, I did this by accident, because no one ever super likes by on purpose. So anyways, you look at their pictures. There's only like, let's say 4 or 5 pictures, and then there's a profile that's like a mini cap. So you don't have much to go on. So if you're in like a playing mood, you're like, I'm going to swipe right for everybody and say F the system. Or if you're like a gigantic WWE wrestler, you're like, hey, you know what? Don't give a damn.
I'm in town for the night. I need to get my rocks off.
Right. You know, I'm in town. I need some
That's
steak.
a hell of an idea. I wonder how many other wrestlers are on Tinder. We should check that out. Yes, I've heard that. You know, we're going to see Cheeseburger on there. We're going to see... Who was not married? Shit. I bet you there's a lot of indie wrestlers on there.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know if you had the experience. I've heard stories about this, and like you have like some of these indie guys, and they're in pretty good shape, but they go into the bar like, I'm a wrestler. Yeah. Have you ever experienced any of that?
Have I ever seen a wrestler do that shit?
Yeah.
No. I mean, when I was active, we all went back to the guy's place. You know, afterwards, like hung out.
Did what?
Just they smoked weed and drank beer.
Okay.
And we practiced moves. We'd like, hey, let's talk about this spot. We'd practice a move or a set, or talk about linking different spots together. You know. But I think if a guy goes into a bar and he's like, I'm a pro wrestler, people will be like, yeah, so? Like, I talked about it at work before. I don't talk about like, hey, look at me. I just talk about like, see that funny bump on my shoulder? That's what happened.
You ever see the MTV special about the guy who wanted to become a wrestler? Like, way back, like in the late 90s?
I don't think so.
Oh. They had a guy like that on there. It was weird.
Really?
Yeah. I gotta look that up one day and watch it again. That was ridiculous. So wrestlers, up becoming wrestlers. If you're in town looking for a hot day, I guess Tinder is the go-to app. So there you go. I wonder like if like businessmen, you know, I don't know, like business guys. I don't know if they have those anymore. Like they would like, oh, I'm going out of town on business. Like that type of dudes, totally. They probably use that, right?
It's totally that kind of scene.
Some girl at work was once showing me this thing where you can link it up to their phone, and like if they're near you, you can see if they're near you.
Oh yeah. Well, with that, every dating app nowadays pretty much will have a GPS option, and if you activate it, it'll say like, you know, you can look by nearby, so you can see who's in your neighborhood. And you can set like a 1 to like 10-mile perimeter, and if they're nearby, it'll pop up. And so Tinder works that way. Tinder lets you set your distance from like 1 mile to I think like 100. I don't know if you do 100, but like the idea is you're there to meet someone quick. And the thing about Tinder, I was told about Tinder by this obnoxious fat guy at work who told me he got laid every weekend with it. Really? And when he told me this, I didn't believe him. But when I found out he was a savage cokehead, I got to believe him a little more, because you know, coke makes people do stupid things.
Yeah.
So he's telling me how, oh yeah, you can get super laid on Tinder, and I'm like, really? The thing about Tinder though is that almost every single profile includes the words "not here for a hookup," "not looking for a hookup," some variation of those words.
Aren't they all looking for a hookup?
It's a hookup app. That's what it's there for. The idea of Tinder, or most apps that let you do this, it's like Grindr for gays. You know, it's like the idea is that we can meet people close, and if you don't want to hook up, well, that's fine. But like,
now this is not like a Match.com you're trying to get married off this thing. This is like
but it's the same people. It's a funny thing. It's the same people, and that's the thing too. It makes you laugh. It's like the same people who are on Match or whatever are on. Oh, well, I'm not here for hookup, but you're on. It's like going to an orgy, going, I'm here to shake hands. Like, yeah, you can probably get what you want if you want to hook up, but you know, you wouldn't go there to like, you know, read the Bible. You know, like, don't use a hookup app to meet your husband. Although, I have a friend who met her husband at a gangbang, so, you know, it can work out.
Wow.
Yep. True love. It can happen, folks.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? So just to do some house cleaning before we call it a night here. Our next show will be a cornucopia of wrestling footage throughout the NWA, as we prepare to go back to St. Louis. So this time emanating from the Kiel Auditorium. So that should be a fantastic show. Pretty excited about that. There's a couple things I wanted to get out of the way. Again, guys, don't forget that this is a fantasy project. I understand that everything that you see on the screen is not 100% accurate to the way it was back in 1983. I just want to be clear on that. Again, we are limited about the technology and the creative wrestlers. Now, I do not create any of these wrestlers. Now, I may enhance or change things when I can, but what you see is basically all CAWs, creative wrestlers, whatever you want to call them, that I've downloaded from the community creations. So, I try to do my best at finding the most accurate and the best-looking character models to represent our favorite wrestlers from years gone by, and they're not always going to be 100%. Be patient, but if you see any glaring errors, like championship belts that are inaccurate or something that I can change quickly, please let me know. It's going to take some time because I do have a lot of these episodes already in the can. So if you make a suggestion or you notice something that's incorrect, it may take me a few months to change it, at least in your time. But when I'm producing these, it's happening in real time, so to speak. So just want to keep that in front of you guys, top of mind. So I just wanted to make sure you guys have understanding of that. And this is to have some fun and kind of give you a taste of what I would do if the NWA, if I was in control of the NWA and we took this bad boy national. So I just want everyone to get a feel for that. In addition, I got some questions about what I'm going to do with 2K17. I know I've announced this already. I wanted to do 2 shows using WWE 2K17. One being a up close look at promotions that we're not featuring here on the project. So it would be your AWA, Ring of Honor, ECW, Global, World of Sport, those kind of promotions. And to be completely honest, full disclosure, I went to record the first episode, which would have been Ring of Honor. Like I said, I don't make any of these creative wrestlers. So I went to Community Creations to download Ring of Honor, a Ring of Honor roster. And I was horrified at what I seen, because it seems to me that the creative wrestlers aren't as good as they were in 2K16 around the same time. This is around the time I started filming. Not filming, but recording footage. So right. I don't know if it's more difficult to create wrestlers in 2K17. That might be the case. I'm not 100% sure. Again, I don't know the inner workings. Again, every time I create a wrestler, it looks like crap. So
there's that. So I had to put that definitely on hold for now, until I want to try back next month and see if there some guys are putting in some really good work, and there are some guys who put some really great work into 2K16. Hopefully, see a lot of these wrestlers come over to 2K17. So I'm hopeful for that. In addition, I was going to do the 1984 project on WWE 2K17, but again, I'm going to have to wait and see how the career wrestlers kind of shake out from this. And see if we can move forward for that. There's a possibility that I may have to do one or both on WWE 2K16. And that's basically the way it goes. And it's funny because, I'll tell you a quick story. So I was able to download the Ring of Honor arena and show, and I wanted to be like 2005 Ring of Honor, because a lot of the guys I'm using that I planned was 2005 Ring of Honor, although it was going to be a kind of Ring of Honor throughout the eras. So you would see the early stuff and the middle throughout the entire show was kind of the original plan. So you would see like a CM Punk, and he'd be wearing his like basketball shorts, and you would see Homicide, and you would see Bryan Danielson, and up until like current wrestlers like Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly and Jay Lethal, and it would kind of bring us
from the beginning to present day.
Okay.
I download the first arena. I go to play a match to see how it would work out, and it fucking glitched out. And it basically would cause it not to crash, but you would have the 1, 2, 3. It wouldn't go to a replay screen, and it wouldn't move forward. So it was just stuck. Like the guy's just celebrating in the ring, and then eventually he just stops, and he just stands there.
Oh, it sounds like a good time.
So hopefully they can either fix it, fix stuff like that on the next update, or I'm going to have to download a new arena and take it from there, and hopefully the creative wrestlers are better. It seems like 2K17 is very glitchy. I mean, all 2K games are glitchy across the board, so that's the way it works. We'll take it from there. Now, guys, I don't know if you guys noticed, but the last couple of videos, when I go to say goodbye, it cuts me off. And I have no idea why. When I produce the show, I lay the audio track down and I have the footage, and I render the file, and then I play it for myself to make sure it's okay. It has it in there. So I say goodnight, and it's in there. And then when I upload to YouTube, it's missing. And it's the strangest thing. I don't understand what's going on. It's weird. So I just want to make sure that, guys, this is not me being a horrible, producer, content creator on YouTube. It's just I don't know why it's doing that. So I'm going to try to figure it out. We'll see if it happens on this one, and hopefully I won't get cut off. So we are officially out of time for Matt Riley, the Benoit hater. I'm Lex G. Have